Paul Hillier has chosen a very interesting selection of 4 English composers from around the sort of early 19th century. Interesting in that actually they're very little known, despite the fact that actually they're in very good standing in their times. So it's lovely to come back and examine this repertoire, and there's some lovely gems in it. Henry Bishop was a professor of music in Edinburgh and in Oxford, produced a huge amount of operas, oratorios, this sort of thing, very, very prolific. Foresters sound the cheerful horn. It's a glee. It's usually sung by a group of men, alto, tenor, bass, and by alto I mean countertenor. And quite often they started off as drinking clubs, that sort of thing. Yeah, very much of an older world, sort of after dinner song and that sort of thing. Probably is best listened to after a sherry or two.
For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. Diana with her nymphs this morn will hunt the stag to bay. For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. Diana with her nymphs this morn will hunt the stag to bay. At length return from healthful chase, the bark has crowned the day. While Venus with seducing grace shall all our toil repay. All our toil repay. For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. Diana with her nymphs this morn will hunt the stag to bay. For is to sound the cheerful horn, sound the cheerful horn. For is to sound the cheerful horn, sound the cheerful horn. Hark to the woods away, away, hark to the woods away. Diana with her nymphs this morn will hunt the stag to bay. For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. 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 For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. For is to sound the cheerful horn, hark to the woods away. Hark to the woods away. Away, 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 away.
So the last thing you said to me that you want to put this on. Yeah.
I have to say I love coming to St. Canice's. It's just wonderful to see all this wonderful medieval architecture and all of the wonderful monuments around the place as well. Kilkenny has such a character to it. It's a pity that there isn't an audience today, but to be honest, it's always a privilege to be able to stand in the middle of a cathedral with a couple of people and just sing and just revel in the acoustic that there is in the building. When evening's twilight gathers round, it's a very, very beautiful piece. It's by John Liptrot Hatton, who was a very talented man, and the reason that he, I think, probably didn't go to greater heights was the fact that he was so talented. He had a great sense of humour, and I think there was a bit of divilment in the man, and so quite often if there was a concert going on, he'd come in and you had no idea whether he's going to sing a comic song or to sit down at the piano and play a Bach toccata and fugue from memory. So, I mean, it was amazing. His breath was incredible. This particular piece that we are singing, it's a really lovely little snapshot, one of his finer things.
myself seek sweet repose. Then I think of thee, my love. I think of thee, my
Chamber choir is effectively 16 soloists wrangled together by a, by a director of music. When we bring it down to a quartet, it does put a little bit more responsibility on the individual singers, but it also gives you a little bit more artistic freedom as well. There is nowhere to hide, it's quite exposed, but sometimes that's good for people, you know. So yeah, it's always nice to be able to rise to these challenges as well. One of the things that chamber choir in its early days actually had was being a broadcasting choir. It came from its origins in the RT singers and Core Radio Éireann, I think it was, in the 1940s or thereabouts. So actually we've been spending a lot of time producing performances for broadcast. So it's nice to know that we're actually reaching a very, very wide audience that we might not necessarily have reached beforehand. God is a Spirit is by William Sterndale Bennett. And it's quite a reverent piece. Sterndale Bennett was probably unrivaled in his time. He had become a principal of the Royal Academy of Music in London, and he was also professor of music in Cambridge. And he was so well renowned that actually when he died, he was buried in Westminster Abbey. Kilkenny Arts Festival is great because it has been going for so long. Every year there is a festival, come what may, even in pandemics. And I think that is so important for musicians because it provides the security that you know there's a slot in your year where you work up to something big and you put it on in that festival. Where's my orchestra? The last piece is Orpheus with his lute, which is by George McFarren. He very much followed on from Sterndale Bennett. His output of chamber music, vocal, choral music, operas, incidental music was actually quite enormous. So another of these rather forgotten people who, if you went back and had a look, you'd find an enormous amount of music to examine.
Orpheus with his lute,